Hello and welcome to Critics of the Coast, episode number 2. My name is Gabe from Unsolicited Designs, and I'm joined again by my good friends Colin. Colin, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
I'm great, glad to hear it. As well as my good friend Sean. Sean, what's up with you?
I'm doing well. Ready to go spelunking in these caverns.
Oh yeah, very good. I love it. We're off to a hot start. So, as usual with our discussions here, we're going to talk about most everything that involves this set here, the theme, the flavor, some different art that we may or may not enjoy, as well as all the mechanics we'll discuss and what we think about them. And I'm going to start off with the theme for the set here. We are revisiting Ixalan now, and the first time we were there, we had all the pirates and the merfolk and the vampires and the dinosaurs, and that was kind of the big draw. Now we're seeing all those things again, but we're also going subterranean, so there's some other tribes that have appeared now. Cats, which I know Colin, I'm sure, is a great fan of, a great cat lover, with his multiple cat decks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see those make an appearance.
Yes. And the other thing that stood out to me were another creature type where gnomes was a big thing I noticed within the set. There's actually 11 creatures that are gnome type, and there are 6 other cards that create gnomes. So this is an odd place to start, but that stuck out to me. And I don't know about you, or if you were gnome people yourselves, but I find a lot of people have a strange fascination with gnomes. Does anyone know why that is?
Hey, put them in your garden.
Yeah.
Someone's got to protect the
Statuette.
flowers and such.
Are you gnome fans? I guess I wouldn't be surprised to learn if either you were like into gnomes, because what is a gnome except like a...
I'm not really into gnomes more than any other mythical thing. I liked David the gnome as a child.
Okay, all right. Well, that makes sense. But for viewers who may not be aware, Colin and Sean are both very Irish. So what, to me, what is a gnome except a variation of a leprechaun, I guess.
They're different. It's racist.
All right, yeah, okay. Coming in hot. Though the one thing I was I was looking into this a little bit because I was like, what is up with gnomes? And apparently, according to blooming-secrets.com, gnomes are thought to provide protection from minerals and buried treasure. So, I thought it was a little strange that gnomes are such a prevalent type in this set, but it might actually be the fact, Wizards actually was onto something here, and gnomes are protectors of buried treasure, which is a theme in the set as well.
That is
So
true.
leprechauns keep their gold. Leprechauns keep their gold on top of the.
Yeah, that's an
And
interesting.
the gnome keep
Yeah.
So there you go. So the cousins.
Yeah, that is an interesting split. And I actually have something related to that. We'll remind me to come back to that when we were discussing the set mechanics, because there is that kind of connection as well. So, any other thoughts about the themes of the set? Obviously, like caves and discovery. Any thing that spoke to you about the themes of this set?
I mean, I do like the themes of this set kind of being like, pitfalls and kind of subterranean exploration. I think it's interesting compared to especially the first time we were in Ixalan, where it was like, jungle and kind of pirates on the high seas kind of thing. I think it's like an interesting take to show a different part of the world.
Yeah, this is an interesting one for me because I wasn't really playing when the original 2 Ixalans kind of came out. So I played. I think that was during my lull. So I think one day I went to a shop that was doing a draft and I picked up like 1 pack of each of those 2 randomly. And I think I've picked up cards from it. Over the years I've dropped many of those cards in my commander decks and stuff. But so it really didn't too much experience with the original 2 versions of it. So this was kind of it's a different vibe. I think when you go back to like a set
Right.
like we just did with Eldraine, where you've been there and now you get to see a different side of that. So like I feel like I did miss out on a little bit of that with this because I wasn't as connected to the game. Yeah, it's kind of my first time in here. So I think maybe when I went into it, I was expecting with that pirates and dinosaurs in my brain, and so this kind of took me in a little bit of a different direction.
Right.
Not bad or good. It's just a different feeling going into
Your
it.
maiden voyage into Ixalan, as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an interesting twist on those themes, as Sean mentioned, being above in the jungle and now down below in the depths. So yeah, I do like the theme overall. I thought it was a good change of pace for this plane. When we last spoke and talked about Ravnica and the murder mystery world, we weren't really too pleased with the direction they took for Ravnica in that plane. But I think they really did a better job of hitting the mark and really mixing things up in a way that was interesting and felt, fine. Wasn't so jarring as I felt the murder mystery Ravnica world was.
And I'm like we mentioned with that too. They can incorporate this theme more if there's like another return to Ixalan, where with the murder mystery thing, we just suspect it'll be dropped completely next time we go there.
Right, yeah, we won't see that again. So, unless there's anything else to add about the theme, we can get into a little bit of the flavor and the tropes that we saw in the set here. One of the things I'll talk about briefly is just the story of the set. I don't know if either of you got a chance to read any of that. I'm trying to keep up with that as best I can for these discussions. And I thought this story was actually pretty good, at least the culmination of it. I feel like the last two chapters of the story were really exciting. Everything kind of comes to a head here where you've got multiple different groups delving down into the caverns of Ixalan, looking to open up this, this legendary kind of door and see what's on the other side. And so there's this competition between the vampires and this fungal threat that's growing down there. The Myco Tyrant is this looming threat down below. And it really was actually a pretty interesting story. Though the one thing that stood out to me is I felt like the god cards in this set are fairly notable. And I was like, oh, these are really cool. But interestingly, in the story, the gods are only mentioned, except for Axejaw. Axejaw is a big part of the story. But they're only mentioned in passing, and only two of them are. So I thought that was a little strange. But overall, I was pretty pleased with the story. Did you either get a chance to read into that or have any thoughts about the story just from what you can see on the cards, maybe?
I think I watched like a lore video. I think I started reading the story, but didn't keep up with it. But also, I think from what I gather from the cards, it seems like the story of this is very much the story of the first Ixalan, where it's like all these different factions are racing to get to the treasure, right?
Yeah.
Like in the first one, it was the hidden city or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
Now it's
Haraska.
like the sun behind the door.
Yes, that's very true. It is a similar tale where you've got more or less the same factions competing to race to this, a certain location.
Yeah, I didn't really go into it too much in depth with it, but yeah, that is interesting. I guess like when you're doing a sequel, right? I think maybe that was some of our beef to say with like Karlov Manor, right? Was it kind of just felt like a real pivot for the sake of a pivot, where if they're gonna do it, maybe they kind of wanted to carry some of those that feeling, I guess, over into just kind of change up the scenery a little bit. So
right,
kind of makes sense, I guess, to follow along that a little bit as a retread a little bit of the same ground, but if you're kind of putting it in a new spot, you get that familiarity, I suppose, is nice to have.
Yeah, in this one, the Sun Empire, which are more or less the humans, and the vampire group are both kind of racing towards the inner city there behind the door. The vampires are trying to awaken their god Axejaw, and the humans are more or less just trying to rediscover their roots and kind of learn what is within the heart of the world. And at the same time, the pirates have like this mining operation. As they dig deeper, they discover that their miners have all been abducted. They've all disappeared because the Myco Tyrant is basically devouring them, turning them into a hive mind. So it's a really cool kind of like horror story going on in the background. And I know, Colin, you're a big fan of horror tales, so I wasn't sure if you picked up any art or flavor or anything in this set that kind of spoke to any horror movies that you're familiar with.
No, that's an interesting point. Yeah, nothing really jumped at me other than, like the obvious stuff, the references to the vampires and the bats, finding the bats was pretty cool. Yeah, no, nothing like that. That's an interesting thought, though. Yeah, if they're pulling with that element of the story there.
Yeah, it didn't come across to me in the cards when I was looking through the set, but after I read the story, I was like, oh, okay, I like that element to it. I feel like there was a cool combination of different story types going on there. But yeah, I didn't really get the sense that clearly from the cards.
That's like a classic like horror setting too, right? Is the sort of the underground caves holding some kind of like mysterious like foe or nemesis or something, right? Like I think about like The Descent is a great one that I rewatched not too long ago, but like that's all about like going into exploring caves, and that one has like a real big claustrophobia, like that part of that. You could take or leave the threat at that point of just being in tight caves and stuff is naturally very unsettling. So
Yeah, right.
yeah, I mean, I think they do. Now that we're kind of talking about it, I guess some of these cards you kind of do see that boxiness, in the art. It's a little bit tight, but then they kind of get away from it as well with some of the other the above the surface stuff too. So I think it kind of goes a little bit back and forth. But
You mentioned that like the kind of being trapped under there. There's a card called Out of Air where the art on that really captures that feeling, depicting this human as the water level is rising on him, and he's just the roof of the cave is right next to him, and it's like okay, he's
yeah,
trapped. It's not good.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and whenever
That whole
those
scene, you could just picture that playing out in a movie, or even I
yes.
feel like countless music videos too, something like similar to this. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Whenever those things come up in movies where it's like, oh, the water's rising and we're trapped in here, we have to hold our breath and go underwater and swim a distance. I'm always like, okay, that's where I die in this movie because I've got to have my eyes open. I'm not good at that. I've got to swim under the water. It's like, okay, this is just death for me. So I always get really
Yeah.
tense with those types of scenes. So yeah, those horror movie elements which didn't stand out to me just looking at the cards, but in the story. The elements that did definitely catch my attention, though, are the Indiana Jones tropes, I'll call them here, where you've got the whip equipment and like the temple traps with like the boulder and the saw blades, all those types of things stood out to me as things I recognized, and I liked their implementation more or less. I thought those were fun things to include in the set.
I thought a lot of those were pretty fun too. Just like also the general cave themes, spelunking,
Mm-hmm. Yes, I like when they can use a good word in their cards, and Splunking was one that I was happy to see. Were there any tropes or anything that fell flat for you? I'm not sure if, we didn't seem to pick up on a whole lot of them, I guess, but anything that you saw and were just kind of like, oh, this seems out of place, or you just didn't appreciate?
No, I mean the only thing I could think of an artifact focus in the set.
Mm-hmm.
But considering there's like a civilization down under there, I mean, it kind of makes sense that they'd have all these mechanical gnomes and traps and stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
the story behind that is, the civilization within the core of the world is aware of the Myco Tyrant, and in order to stop him from basically taking over that inner area where Chimmel is, the inner sun, they have sealed themselves off and have created the gnomes and all their machines to fight the Myco Tyrant if he were to come knocking.
they should just succumb to the micro tyrant. I'm part of the hive.
Yeah,
Then
that's
there
always
would
the
be
best
peace in the
policy, right?
cabin.
Yeah, it's they who are the problem, not the Myco Tyrant.
Poor
He just
misunderstood
wants to
Myco Tyrant.
unify.
Yes.
One more in a long line of misunderstood tyrant.
Yes. Poor Thanos. Thanos was right.
Yeah, right.
Beyond that story elements, the only thing I had notes on were just any like flavor text. I don't know if any cards stood out to you with just maybe the flavor text on them, or just kind of the thematic element of it that you enjoyed.
I really like the flavor text for Terror Tide. Those who go under rise again as cruel mockeries of their former selves, spewing foul water and keening with sorrow.
Oh, that is pretty good. I like a lot of the words.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I think I just like the
I
word
like
spewing.
Spewing, keening. I thought that was a kind of a nice
viewing.
word.
I was gonna say shout out Sovereign Okinek Aua. I don't know. I'm gonna butcher that. I would say
Perfect.
that's the
Got
first
it.
time I'm gonna
10 out
butcher.
of 10.
Or is that the first one I'm gonna butcher tonight? But I like his flavor text is very good too. It says, "As surface empires send their explorers down, his hungry eyes look upward."
Oh, yeah. That's a good
And
pick.
everyone else is climbing down, and he is still on the top.
Though the one that stood out to me that I liked is Glorifier of Suffering, where it says, everyone wants to be remembered. Few are willing to do what it takes. Just up to the challenge. Yeah, and so I was pretty happy. There was a couple flavor texts that stood out to me, but I like those selections there. I think that's pretty good. So overall, we are pretty happy with the themes of the set and the design space that they moved into. The story I thought was good, and we're pretty happy with the tropes and the flavor overall of the set. So that's pretty nice. We're way ahead of last time, so that is good.
Yeah.
Moving on to the art for the set. I'm interested to see if there's any pieces that really stood out to you or what your feeling was overall with the art. Personally, I thought the style was, I don't want to say subdued, but just maybe not too serious. I feel like maybe a little cartoonish overall. Except I feel like the gods looked a little more serious, and maybe some of the vampire cards. But even with the dinosaurs and things like that, I felt like they didn't look as threatening or as menacing. It was more just kind of cartoonish, maybe the house style for the set. So nothing really drew my attention in a major way. Sean, what did you think about some of the art choices for the set?
I liked a lot of the art. I kind of liked the creepy, skeletal stuff and all. I liked all the fungusy
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Like all that kind of stuff was very dark.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing that really stood out to me as like bad
Mm-hmm.
or like really offended my sensibilities. It was either stuff that I really liked or stuff that was just like, meh, you know.
Right.
But I do like the Mesoamerican kind of motif. I think that looks great on a lot of cards. Um, some of the gnomes kind of look silly. Maybe that's what you were speaking about, to like the cartoony, cutesy
Yeah.
kind of stuff. A lot of the
I,
dinosaurs, yeah, like they didn't look menacing or ferocious, but I mean, it's fine. I feel like that's kind of where the art direction is heading as a whole in the game, anyways, to kind of like soften some of the hard parts, the dark things and scary bits.
Yeah, I think it's a little more friendly. Like friendly. I don't know if you'll be able to see if you guys are on your phones here, but I just put basically the card that stands out to me as problematic in the art is Pathfinding Axejaw. It's called. It's a 3 colorless and a green for.
Flashlight dinosaur?
Yes, flashlight dinosaur. Basically, just looking at that card, it's like okay, it's got a headlamp. It's got on its chest, it's got a light too. It's just leading the people around. It's like okay, that just looks pretty goofy, like not serious.
well, I mean, if you're in in an area surrounded by dinosaurs, you really need to put them to work for your benefit at some point.
As a aside, I don't know if either of you know this cartoon series from back in the day, Dino Riders. It's not like something that I remember seeing on TV. I remember having some VHS tapes of it, and it was basically exactly like this, where they have dinosaurs with, that they ride on these with all these metal harnesses, and there's lasers and stuff like that. So it's very cool, but it's also like goofy like this, where the dinosaurs
Mhm,
are equipped to do what the jobs that the humans need, and they ride them around. So
mhm.
It's like the Flintstones.
yeah, the
Yeah.
Flintstones but with lasers is what it was. So it was like cool, but still a little goofy.
Well, I think one to that point too. I mean, I think the one that stood out to me was the new version of name card, but Itlamok, the new art for Itlamok, I think
Uh
is one of those ones that comes off. Like it definitely comes off as at least the front side of it, the enchantment side is definitely very very silly looking. Like because it's got all like the gnomes surrounding, glowing. I guess it's a symbol. And then there's kind of like you see like all like the cartoony like vines kind of coming down. So yeah, I think
yeah.
that was one where they really like leaned into what you're kind of talking about there with the sort of more cartoony
Yes.
or
hmm
yeah,
The
that
art.
just like just the characters in that one really stand out to me. Well,
Yeah.
because it almost like if unless you get like real tight on it too. I mean, it looks like the way I draw people sometimes, where it's just like you can see it's kind of just like basic. It's sort of like basic shapes. Like there's two
hmm
like little circles for hands and two little circles for feet and
Right.
stuff. So
Yeah.
it's like it gives it that very very
Very
stripped
soft.
down and
hmm
soft
The cards I think that I enjoyed the art on most of all in this set, and maybe rightly so, were the lands. I feel like a lot of the caves looked very interesting to me. I liked the environments that they created for the set. So overall, I think the creatures maybe didn't appeal to me as much, but definitely the lands and the setting that they created for the set, I thought that looked great, and they did a great job with that. Even like the creature lands, the man lands. I really enjoy kind of like the hidden elements of how it's a land, but with all the elements of it line up in a way that you can see the creature inside of it. So
No, I
especially
like
the
all the
llama.
lands too, especially some of the transform lands. I think is really cool, like art on the back, like the Temple of Cyclical Time and
Right.
the backside of Brass's Tunnel Grinder. I
Mm-hmm.
forget the name of the land. The Searing Rift
Oh
or
no, it is
something.
Tekuton. Yeah, Tekuton the Searing Rift. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like all the like lava pouring out of stone
Uh
heads
huh. Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, I'm a real sucker for when the card art has like a bright color kind of overlaid into it or across it, like the Urza Saga lands. Anything where it's got that cool kind of glowing color to it is a big draw, and lava in the land is definitely something that appeals to me. So I mentioned that pathfinding Axejaw, was there any other art that stood out to you that you really liked or thought was goofy?
Yeah, there were some pieces that I really liked. Obviously, I like Corpses of the Lost, being a big fan of skeletons.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
That one was pretty cool.
Like I said earlier, I liked a lot of the like fungus-ridden skull kind of stuff. So like the skull cap snail, and there's some other pieces by that artist that I also really liked, like the bedrock tortoise,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the abyssal gore stalker. The artist's name is Maxime Menard,
Seaman art. Oh, okay.
but it's not a name I'd like had made mental note of until I was kind of looking through this set at some of the art, and I was like, pieces were standing out to me, and I just happened to notice that they were all by the same person.
Yeah, it's really nice when that happens. I really appreciate that. It's
Yeah.
kind of cool to have an artist that you follow and whose style sticks out to you, and then you can kind of, as the new sets are revealed, you see some art, and you're like, oh, that looks pretty interesting. That looks kind of familiar, and you recognize it, and you can see it was an artist that you've enjoyed their work before. So I like that, and that's something I definitely want to look out for and see. Great, yeah, and the pieces that you mentioned here, now looking at them, like there is certainly a lot less cartoonish art overall. I think maybe just the pieces that stood out to me, it was like those cartoony ones, like, oh, maybe the art isn't for me in this set, but it was good to get your perspective on it, because looking at the selections that you made there, I was like, oh yeah, that is pretty grim. The skeletons are all impaled and they look pretty gnarly. So yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
I mean, that's just what my eye goes to.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I didn't find anything so offensive that it bothered me, but that's
Yeah.
probably because I just glanced at it and looked over it and was like, this is cool.
Yeah.
And look at something else.
No, only the Axejaw offended me. Everything else is like, okay, maybe it's not for me, but all right. Okay.
I'm gonna
Enough
put
about
every
that.
one of my green decks just to annoy you now.
Please do. Please do. All right. So that's a good. We'll leave the art discussion there, and let's move into the mechanics of the set. So we have a returning mechanic here, which is Explorer, where you get to reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, you can put it into your hand, and if it's a non-land card, you can decide to put it in your graveyard. And Explorer will only function if you have a creature in play. So basically, you'll choose a creature that explores, you'll make that choice if it's the land or if it's a non-land, and if it's the non-land, your creature will also get a +1/+1 counter as a bonus. Any thoughts on Explore, Colin? As a player maybe kind of seeing this more for the first time, any feelings about that mechanic?
Yeah, this was sort of my first time seeing it, like kind of a widespread, um, more of a widespread environment. I thought it was that's a pretty good one. I like just the sort of mechanics of it, right? Just being able to look at look at the top card, and what I forget what is the thing. There's like somebody told me this. It's like the land to your hand, and
Mm-hmm.
otherwise it goes back, right? Yeah, there's like
Right.
that sort of rhyme that is not.
Oh, I see. Like a
Yeah,
mnemonic or
land to
something.
your, because
Land
I
to your
was
hand,
like
card to the yard, or something like that.
something like that. Yeah, I think it was something like that. It was something to make me remember it, and I thought clearly it's not stuck with
Clearly, it
me
didn't work.
over the month. But in that moment, I liked it. But I do like the mechanic though. And I think there's some. It's just like a cool, and it's on. It feels like it's on theme too with the set
Mm-hmm.
too. And there's. I know it's one that's coming back, so I doubt that it's not like I could improve upon it in any way, like we talked about previously with like some of the new ideas that they brought in. But this one I think is a solid. It's a solid one, and it's on point too.
Good. Yeah, I like your opinions there. Sean, how do you feel?
So, I mean, the first time Explore came around, I thought it was like an interesting mechanic, but it never really like grabbed me. But I think with this set, they did a better job of like exploring the design space for it.
I see what you did
I
there.
feel like with the first,
Very nice.
I feel like with the first Ixalan go around, it was like mostly just ETBs when
Mm-hmm.
creatures entered.
Right.
There might be some cards that you benefited from for payoff, but I feel like with this set they took that and they did different things. So there's like there's that Deep Fathom Echo, which it explores at the beginning of every combat and then can become a clone of something.
Yeah, I think that card's
There's
very
the
good.
black white the black white legend Amalia, who like explores whenever you gain life, and then when you get to 20 counters, it does something.
It destroys all other creatures.
Yeah, that's something.
So that's something. Yeah, I think
That
the
is
rate that
something.
it explores is very good. Like just gaining life is
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah,
And
Amalia
there are some
might turn up
creatures.
in one of my decks.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's a good
I was
choice.
thinking about the life gain, white black life gain deck. I was like, oh, maybe I could make her a commander. She's very cheap.
You're gonna replace Astarion?
No, I couldn't do that. I thought about it a lot though.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Couldn't
want you to.
commit. That is a good one though. I like that. I like her a lot.
But I just think this time I'm more interested in it, and I think they're taking it in a more interesting and more playable direction.
Yeah, I
Granted,
agree.
there are still creatures with it on ETB, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
I'm more intrigued and excited to throw it in my deck without having to just like build an explore deck. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes, I think they did. To your point, they did a better job of giving you different ways to explore. So I think that's huge. I think the mechanic itself is excellent and should just be the type of thing that we see frequently along the lines of like cycling, where it just helps you play the game. So if you need to find lands, it will help you do that. And if you need to dig for other things, it can help you do that as well. So I think it's just a very versatile mechanic that helps players play the game, and it gives you some choice and some autonomy in how you do that. One of the other great innovations I think they came up with for Explore in this set was including maps, which are the artifact tokens that you can pay one and sacrifice to have a creature you control explore. I think this is a brilliant addition to the game. It seems like they're always adding an artifact token in sets anymore, and I don't hate that. I think
So many.
yeah, I'm happy to see that, though there is like kind of a, we're getting to a point where there's maybe too many, but I think it's an excellent variation on the explore mechanic that kind of lets you put an explorer in the bank and just kind of save it for the right moment, or help you kind of build up a creature and kind of set up your game plan in that way. The only critique I have is that the map tokens only appear on 9 cards total. There's 4 rares, 1 uncommon, and 4 common cards. Honestly, I just wanted to see more maps. I don't know. How did you feel about the maps?
I kind of felt the same. Like I was hoping that there would be more map production, just because it is such like a great token. You know what I mean? Like you said, you save up either a counter or like a land in your hand, or you could throw a card in your yard. There's just so much versatility there. I mean, it's better than exploring in my eyes, but
Right. I feel the same way. And maybe, I guess, to our point of there being too many tokens, maybe they're recognizing that and trying to rein it in a little bit. But as a major theme of the set, I feel like just including it on only 9 cards is just not enough. So I'd like to have seen more
Yeah,
maps.
that is the low.
Yeah. So there's 18 cards that explore, 4 rare, 8 uncommon, 6 common, and then 9 maps. So basically 27 explore cards in total. I'm eager to see maps return. So at the very least, they piqued my interest. So I think they did a good job there.
Explore seems low. Just to, just you said there were 18.
18 cards with that explore. Yep.
Or yeah, that feels very low for one of the main mechanics. But
This is an
I remember some of
interesting
the numbers.
Yeah, this is an interesting development that I'm becoming more aware of in these since we're having these discussions now. I'm trying to like track this information. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's surprising to me to see what the numbers are, and maybe it's just always been this way and we just weren't aware of it. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to be noting now. Moving on, the next item I have as far as mechanics go are caves, and so if we're in the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, I think it made sense for caves to be a prominent feature. There are 18 cards in the set that are caves. 4 rare, 7 uncommon, 7 common. So there's a very large quantity of caves. And then there's also 10 cards that care about caves. 1 rare, 7 uncommon, and 2 commons. So, Sean, what do you think about caves?
I love caves. I'm a sucker for any kind of land subtype. Desert, cave,
Gate.
spheres, whatever.
Yeah.
Gates.
yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting design space. I really like how a lot of the transform lands were caves. I kind of wish there were more or better cave payoffs,
Right.
but I don't think it's entirely like needed. Yeah, and I just thought they did a lot of cool stuff with the caves. I really like the cave that exiles up to 3 cards from a graveyard, and they can tap for any one of
Yep.
those
Pit of
colors.
Offering.
Yeah, Pit of Offerings. I really like the hidden cycle of caves.
Yes, I agree with you
Uh,
strongly there.
when we talk about Discover, we can talk more about that.
Sure.
But yeah, I thought they were fun, cool. I hope they come back. I don't
Agreed.
have much else to say.
Yeah, I have some stuff to add. Colin, what do you think about caves?
No, yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think a lot of them have kind of neat like secondary abilities or like just useful, utility purposes too. A lot of the ones you guys already mentioned too. But yeah, I agree with the idea of like working in some more of these like land types and just kind of having some different ways to play with like the lands you're putting in your deck because sometimes
Hmm.
that can kind of just from like it can get repetitive. You see a lot of the same ones sometimes, so it's kind of cool to kind of push people. But in that, and I guess to push people into different lands, but kind of just need to Wizards will have to give more payoff though to
That's a
kind of push
that's a
people
great point,
to use a lot
actually.
of these. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good to offer some variations. A lot of the caves are like versions of lands that already exist. Like there's basically a cave that's Tectonic Edge where you can pay one and
Mhm.
tap it to destroy a land. It's called Volatile Fault, and so I really like that that exists. And instead of your opponent gets to search for a land to replace it, but instead of you getting that as well,
Mhm.
you get a treasure instead. So it's like, okay, they did something a little different with that, but it's a card that I recognize. So I like having multiple
Mhm.
versions to choose from, and the cave subtype
Yeah.
is something that could be relevant as well. And then, Colin, one of the things that I thought you made a good point of is how all the caves have some kind of secondary feature, and
Mhm.
and I agree with you, Sean, that it's unfortunate. I feel like I would like to see more cave payoffs, but I think maybe what they did is all the cards that care about caves count the number of caves you control and the number of caves in your graveyard, which I think was a really interesting twist on this because most of the caves have a secondary ability, like Colin mentioned, and they usually involve sacrificing the cave. So your payoff cards, it would feel bad if your payoff card was like, well, how many caves do you have? It's like, well, I guess I don't want to sacrifice them because I need to count the number of caves I have. But instead, the
Right.
payoffs
Mhm.
will include the ones that you've sacrificed, so you can kind of double dip and get value out of using the lands and using the payoff cards. So I think overall that's just really excellent space, and I'm really happy with how the caves play and the payoffs that interact with them. So I think they did a great job with caves. Great. So we're thrilled with the caves, and the only way you can get into a cave is if you happen to descend down into the earth. So the next mechanic is descend, and this one is interesting to me. I want to say it's confusing, not that I don't understand it, but I think especially for a new player, this seems like a mechanic that can lead to some confusion where there's descend, which means at the end of your turn, if you had a permanent card enter your graveyard, then you are considered to have descended. There's also Descend
Mhm.
X, which appears in basically two versions, either Descend 4 or Descend 8, I think are basically the two numbers associated with that, meaning that you need to have 4 or 8 permanent cards in your graveyard. So a card might say Descend 8, you get a bonus ability, and that only will occur if you have 8 permanent cards in your graveyard. There's a third version of Descend, which is Fathomless Descent,
Mhm.
and that is basically counting the total number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So, having explained that, I'm not sure if I did a great job on it, but as I mentioned, I think it is a little obtuse. Colin, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think Descend was probably one of the things that I was like maybe I will say I was like least interested or like grabbed me the least. I think it is like it is a little bit strange that they're kind of have that idea kind of spread out across, three different sort of variants of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like I think the idea of descending is kind of like I don't know, particularly interesting, I guess, in a sense because it feels like they've named sort of it's like a game action, right? They've kind of
Mm-hmm.
it's just like that's just like a thing that happens. Things get put into your graveyard. Like that's just things that just happens throughout the course of the game.
Right.
And now all of a sudden it has like sort of a flavor tied to it. I think that seems like something that's happening right in the Thunder Junction, right? Because now it's like you're committing a crime if you're targeting
Mm-hmm.
something, right? So it's kind of weird
Yeah.
that it feels I don't know. It feels weird to me that if you're taking something that's just like part of the game and then you're putting a name on it, it's like, I don't know, is that an ability or are you just that feels like cheating a little bit for
Right,
me.
because
Yeah,
technically, we could be playing a game that includes no cards from Ixalan, but if a creature card goes into your graveyard from play, it's like, oh, well, Colin just descended. And so, like, I feel what you're
exactly.
saying.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, yeah, this is happening no matter whether
yeah,
we're in a cave or not, we're descending. So,
yeah, yeah. Now
Yeah.
I will say like I think it's kind of nice that there's it's sort of like an incidental ability on some cards. It's just like the one that I was thinking is like Rune Lurker Bat, because I've always been like a Healer
hmm
Hawk fan, and so this is the exact same card but with one additional ability, and it's a bat, I guess. So I kind of like that. That's like okay, I'll take a Healer Hawk that does one more thing
right.
for one mana. But yeah, otherwise that ability in particular, that version of it didn't really ring too true for me.
Yeah. What about you, Sean?
Well, I like Colin's point about it being just like a game action that they named. That kind
hmm
of sounds like cheating. I feel like they just did that as far as like to give it some flavor. I
hmm
mean, the mechanic itself is just like a retooled threshold.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, the ones that trigger at the end of your turn are just like not interesting to me. It's like you get one token or 1+1+1 counter on it.
hmm
And the fact that it's only your turn is also kind of like limiting. Like you either want to like attack and like lose like an actual card, not just a token
hmm
in combat, or you need to discard a card or mill yourself. It's
Right.
like so for the payoff of doing that every turn for like a 1/1 that can't block
Yeah, the
or
fungus
plus
token.
one plus one counter
Yeah.
is just like not worthwhile.
Yeah. I ran
So
into that limitation in my redesigned cards after I did. If you haven't seen my report cards for Lost Caverns of Ixalan, go check that out now. But I retooled the ancient one, who has descend on it, and in my exploration of that and trying to redesign the card, I ran into that problem where I was like, oh well, it'd be interesting if he could attack or block only if you descended this turn. But then the question was, well, can you descend on your opponent's turn? Like you can't have that tied to his ability to block if descend only triggers on your turn. So I think you make a good point there, where descend is templated only to trigger on your turn, and I think that really limits the excitement on a lot of the cards that have that mechanic.
yeah, I mean, I guess some of the like the descend 4 or 8, whatever, descend X amount cards,
Mm.
like that's more like threshold. Yeah, and like again, some of the static buffs that these cards get are like +1/+1 in lifelink or flying or something, and it's like not special. There's the like black green legend that has both like descend 4 and 8, and it gets like menace or trample with 1 and +2/+2 for each. So it just seems like it's not worth the squeeze unless you're already in like a heavy graveyard permanent based strategy. Like I didn't think it was anything special or
hmm
intriguing.
Yeah, there are 28 cards that descend. So there's 2 mythic, 6 rare, 11 uncommon, 9 common, and then 6 fathomless descent cards. 0 mythic, 4 rare, 1 uncommon, 1 common. The only one that really, I like the one that generates a treasure. It's like, okay, just sources of treasure generation I think are not bad, but yeah, only one per turn cycle is not too exciting. And I think the
Yeah.
most powerful of all the descend cards is the Myco Tyrant, our good friend. As I was reviewing that card and assigning the grade, I realized, well, hey, the ability to just mill a bunch of permanent cards is actually, it's pretty cheap and easy to do, and so you can generate a lot of fungus tokens with the Myco Tyrant, and that's pretty easy, and that's really one of the few cards that kind of give you a growing payoff. The more you can descend in a single turn, the more you get out of it. All the other ones are just like, did you descend? All right, get one thing, as you mentioned, Sean. So yeah, a lot of the descend cards aren't too exciting. Just a few of them that I think are worth exploring.
I do think that the spells that have it are a little more interesting.
hmm
So like was it Wail of the Forgotten or like Molten Collapse, where if
Right.
you reach that threshold of permanence in your graveyard, you get like little extra juice from your spell. I think
Right.
that's more interesting than a lot of like the permanent payoffs.
True. Yeah. I think all the Fathomless Descent cards actually I think are very are potentially quite strong. Especially I really
Yeah,
like Matzalantli, the Great Door, where it doesn't do a whole
yeah,
lot. You have to it lets you loot a card per turn, but if you can
Mhm.
craft with it and transform it, then you can add X mana, where that's the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So I think that one is quite strong as well. But yeah, there's a lot
I
of
like
work
that
to
one
be
too.
done. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done to really get the most out of these cards. One other thing I will say about Ascend that I think is a really cool touch is in the original Ixalan, you might remember there was a mechanic called Ascend that cared about you having 10 or more permanents in play, and then you'll be considered to have the
Oh
city's
yeah.
blessing. So I really liked how this was kind of the reverse. As we mentioned before, our original visit to Ixalan was up in the jungle and on the high seas, and we were ascending. And now in the Caverns of Ixalan, we're down below the surface, we're descending. And this mechanic wants you to give up your permanent cards. So I think there's a really cool dichotomy,
Well,
perhaps, if you will.
now that you bring that up,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wish that they would make it more like the city's blessing then, in that
Mm.
it's something that never goes away. So
Right.
you would reach like this threshold, let's say 8 of permanence in your graveyard, and then
Right.
you would get, the cavern's blessing.
That is an
Because
interesting
also,
idea.
like, what we didn't talk about is that like all of these cards also completely fold to graveyard hate.
True. Very true. Yeah. I think that is a great concept, and I wish I had thought of that. Where you just have the reverse city's blessing, the cavern's curse, maybe we could call it, where you achieve that state, and then you kind of have a number that's locked in for you. So all of your
Yeah.
descend cards are active at that point. That's a pretty interesting concept. All right. Well, hopefully someone from Wizards of the Coast will listen to our discussion here and include that on our next visit to Ixalan. All right, well, let's get into what I would assume to be one of the more popular mechanics of the set, which is Discover. This is basically a variation on Cascade with a few important distinctions, but essentially, when you discover, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land card with mana value less than or equal to the discover value. So, for example, if you discover 2, you'll reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land card with mana value 2 or less. Then you'll get to either cast that card for free without paying its mana cost, or if you don't want to do that, you can put that card directly into your hand. So there are 23 cards with Discover, 2 mythics, 3 rare, 8 uncommon, and 10 common cards. Colin, this is also a mechanic that did not appear in the original Ixalan, and I guess it's something you could be relatively familiar with if you've seen any Cascade interactions. But basically, what are your thoughts on Discover?
I do have a Prosper deck that has some Cascade
Oh, right.
shenanigans
I do
happening with
recall.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That got scary the
Yeah,
one
it's like
game, as I remember.
yeah. Yeah, Cascade can be fun and it can also be nuts too. But yeah, Discover it seems like it is a cool one too. I don't like I could definitely see it being like, the power in it for sure. And I think there are some cool cards in here too. Like I think that it's pretty neat that they gave it the Indiana Jones whip card is one of them in there. It's
Right.
I like that's what they kind of there's tied that to. And then I think you guys mentioned the hidden series or the caves earlier too. They all
Mm-hmm.
kind of tie into that as well. So I think that it's cool that they kind of put that on there and then featured it. So like, and those I think are those are the commons, right? Too, and that's it. They're the
The
common lands,
I believe they are
the
common.
the hidden. Yeah, yeah, which is always cool too
Hang
to
on.
because then they'll be more accessible for everybody too. And
Yeah, I think that's huge.
yeah, yeah. So I think Discover is a pretty cool one too. I like that. I might be picking up some of these cards. I haven't really played with any of them yet, but I think I'll probably be trying to incorporate a few of them here.
Yeah, I think you would be wise to use them. Sean, what are your thoughts on Discover?
Well, look, I love Cascade, don't get me wrong. But I feel like Discover is slightly better in that you don't have to just like give up the spell entirely
Mm-hmm.
if you don't want to cast it right then.
Mm,
Granted, it's not tied in with the casting cost of the spell that you're casting. So like you could have a set cast or discover number, but it's still pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Like so I have a Yidris deck, that cascades. So there are certain cards I don't run. I don't run counter spells because there's no point. But like if I were to build a discover deck, then I could put whatever I want in it and then end up drawing that card if I don't want to cast it right then.
Right.
So it kind of like takes away the feel bad of cascading into something that you don't want to cast. So it kind of makes it more powerful in my eyes that way.
I would say it's a clear power upgrade to Cascade as a mechanic. I think it's a very intelligent way to go about it, and I think it's good for Wizards to take gameplay elements that if a player experiences it and it's not something they're thinking about or prepared for, and they get to that moment where they realize, oh, I just did something that's supposed to be really cool and I'm not happy with what happened. So I think it's great to tweak that and remove that from happening. But at the same time, I think Cascade is kind of obscene and obnoxious. It's, as Colin thinks that it can be really fun, especially if you're the one doing it. But if you're not the one doing it, it's kind of just like, oh god, like when is this going to end? Like, can I have a turn? Am I allowed to play? You watch your opponent cast like 4 spells in a row for like 5 mana, and then you're just like, okay, well I can cast one thing, and you go again. It's just like, all right, it can be overwhelming.
Also, the tendency to staple multiple instances of Cascade onto one card was a bit of a problem too. That seemed like, well, what's worse than Cascade? What if you cascaded 3 times?
Yes. Yeah, I think also this should have been something maybe I would prefer to see in like the supplemental products, like the Commander sets, where it's just kind of like, all right, here's a special space to use this mechanic and with that format in mind. And I also kind of would have preferred if they had just errated Cascade as well, because like you said, John, I feel like this is clearly better than Cascade, so I wouldn't not run Cascade cards, but it's just like, well, this is such an improvement. Like, I really wish we could just apply it to all of the cards that do this, and I think that would just be more satisfying if they had gone in that direction.
You would run errata to Cascade to be more like Discover?
Yeah, just to unify that. I don't want it in the sense that I think it would be too, like, I think this mechanic is too powerful to begin with, so I don't really like it on a power level type thing. But I don't know. I guess it's just kind of, it irritates me where it's like, oh, we've got 2 mechanics that do the same thing, except one is just better. It just makes more sense. And it's like, okay, now you've kind of got some confusion.
I was gonna say, I will always have a special place in my heart for Cascade.
It's great. I mean, I love doing it. I think it's, people love to buy packs because they're always excited to see what you're going to get, and Cascade is just, doing that in game. So I can, there's definitely an appeal to it, and I know people like it. I don't see why you wouldn't like it. It's just like it's a little too powerful, I think. But yeah, one of the other suggestions I have for the mechanic, or something I'm not really a huge fan of, is I guess I would like to see them tie the Discover to specific card types. For example, if there's the card Buried Treasure in the set, it's like, oh, okay, that's a great card to exist. I like that they use that. That's a nice thematic thing. But the way Buried Treasure works, you can pay 5 mana, exile it from your graveyard, and discover 5. And so it's like, okay, that's cool. You can unearth the Buried Treasure. What's inside? Well, it could be, like you said, John, it could be a counterspell. Like, okay, what is, does that make sense gameplay wise? Or it's like, you've got Indiana Jones, the swashbuckler whip. Okay, you whip a creature and you discover what they were holding, and oh wait, it's a dinosaur. They were holding a dinosaur. It's like, well, hang on a second. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense gameplay wise, and I know it doesn't have to, but it could have been interesting if this mechanic, they kind of tied it to, maybe the templating would be like discover artifact 2, and it's like, okay, now you get to reveal cards until you reveal an artifact card specifically that costs 2 or less. So that's just one element, one direction I think I would have preferred to see them take it, to kind of rein in the out of control nature of cascading and discovering.
Well, I mean, the way that it's templated, like they could set it up like the way you're suggesting, in that they could template it like, discover artifact and then the mana value.
Yeah.
Whereas with Cascade, it's just Cascade.
True.
There's no like variable in that ability.
Yeah, I like that.
I wouldn't be surprised in a Modern Masters set they do something like that.
Right.
Discover creature, discover artifact.
Yeah, I think that would be better to kind of, again, and it can also help them really tune the power level of the card as well. I like how the discover value is not tied to the card's mana value. So that's a great knob to change the power level, and I think tying a card type to it as well would be another excellent way to control the outcome of the card and maybe stop them from just chaining crazily from one thing into another. Moving on from Discover then, we've got one last mechanic for the set, which is the Craft With mechanic, or more or less like the transform cards in this set. The craft cards basically will request that you pay a mana cost of some sort, as well as exiling, not exactly, they don't have to be cards, but permanents of a certain type or cards of a certain type. So, for example, it might be craft artifact, and it will require you to pay a mana cost, and then exile an artifact from play or from your graveyard to transform the card into the backside. So, this is a mechanic that I'm actually kind of surprised didn't exist until now, and I think there's a lot of excellent design space available in this area. Colin, what are your thoughts on crafting?
Yeah, it is kind of a surprise that something like this didn't exist before, because I kind of feel like maybe it's existed in.
So, yeah, I was surprised that it hadn't existed before because I think there's kind of some like similar stuff with like, right, with spells or something. What is the one that's like is like graft or something? Am I making that up? I feel like there's something like that where you could kind of do both sides of something. You could pay a cost to do both sides of a spell. It's one of those split cards, something along those lines.
Like Fuse, maybe?
Fuse. That's what it is.
Or
Yeah.
Splice.
Splice. Yeah, I think I'm thinking along those lines with those two things. So, but yeah, so it's a cool idea. I like. I'm always a big fan of turning cards over too, just in general.
Yeah.
I think that's I think that's very satisfying whenever you've accomplished something and you get to turn it over, and it's ideally something even better and more
Right.
fun on the other side. So it's the simple joys in life.
That's funny. Yeah, I agree with you, but when flip cards were first introduced as a thing, like cards with a different back, not the magic card back, that was very controversial. People did not like that idea at all. But I think the tides have turned on that, and I think it was good choice. But
now they're in every set practically.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's 19 cards with craft on with the craft ability, 1 mythic, 4 rare, 9 uncommon, 5 commons, and there's 16 cards that just have the ability to transform. So it's not even requiring a craft cost; they just have an ability to transform. 6 mythic, 7 rare, and 3 uncommon. No commons there. Sean, how do you feel about the craft ability?
I think it's an interesting ability. Yeah, I'm not like totally knocked out of the park by some of the commons. But I do think the ability itself is cool, and there's a lot of cool stuff you could do with it. I do like how, for things that are craft with creature or artifact, it doesn't necessarily have to be a permanent that you control. It could be in your graveyard.
Right.
Like, it's got to be a permanent you own, but it doesn't have to be something, on the battlefield. So it kind of can help you still get benefit from spent resources. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's another feel bad moment where you play a creature and you want to be able to craft your other card here, but it requires you to give up the creature that you maybe don't want to give up. So I think that is a good call, Sean, where you can use a resource that's already been spent and get some benefit out of it.
I'm not thrilled about doing it as a sorcery, but I understand why.
Right.
Yeah, some of the craft costs are a bit steep. And there are 2 cards in particular that just seem like kind of pie in the sky for Commander, at least, to ever pull off. So what is it, the Grim Captain's Throne or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
We need a pirate, a dinosaur, a vampire,
and a merfolk.
And a merfolk.
Yeah.
And then the Enigma Jewel, which I'm gonna try to pull off at some point.
You and me both.
Yeah. I mean, see, so that's a very cheap artifact with a good. I understand why that's so expensive. I'm not complaining about why that's such an expensive craft cost, because it's such a cheap artifact with a very useful ability. Tap 2, but you need 4. Was it 4 or 5 artifacts and
4? Yeah.
9 mana.
4 non-land permanents.
Oh, but they need activated abilities.
They need activated abilities, yeah.
So yeah, it's a little side quest, but I mean, I think the payoff is worth trying.
Yes, I agree. They're not all slam dunks, but I think a lot of them are better than they appear. And for the Enigma Jewel in particular, I think it opens up design space that is crucial for players to have good experiences in the game. And I talk about this in my report cards video episode 2, where basically the craft cost on the Enigma Jewel is obscene. It costs, I believe it's 8 colorless and 1 blue. So it's like, okay, well that looks ridiculous. But the trade-off is you get to cast the Enigma Jewel for 1 mana. So you've got a useful front half of the card, and sure, the back half looks like something that might be unattainable, but you get a more powerful backside of the card as a result. And instead of this just Enigma Jewel just being like a 6 mana spell that does what the backside says, you get to play the game a little bit with the front half, and then when the time is right, you'll get the opportunity to flip it over to the back half. So I think it really lets them design cards that are more powerful at a reduced cost because you get to split that cost up over multiple turns. So I like that element of crafting a lot. Some other cards that I really like with it, I think Thousand Moon Smithy is just a knockout card. It's just terrific. I like all of the cards that turn over into a land on the other side. So even ones that may not necessarily require you to craft, but just meet some sort of condition and then transform into a land on the backside. So twists and turns and other cards like that I think are terrific, where you get to play a spell, get a benefit that's maybe not fantastic or overly powerful, but then at some point in time it's going to help you ramp, it's going to help you fix your mana and play the game and give you some more expanded options. So I think that's just really terrific design, like Explorer is, where it just helps players play the game. And in the future, I'm excited to see what other recipes they'll come up with. I think there's a huge range of options and crazy combinations we'll see. So you could get some really difficult or challenging craft recipes, and as a result, get some kind of crazy, powerful ability on the back. Kind of like how we were talking about the Throne of the Grim Captain there, where it's like, okay, what are the odds this is going to happen? But it's an exciting little quest to work towards, and maybe get something that you won't expect to see in every game you would play. So overall, that's all the mechanics of the set now. I think we're pretty happy with them. Explorer and the maps, great. Caves, great. Descending, okay. Maybe Fathomless Descent makes the cut, but Discover, mixed opinions, but clearly an excellent mechanic overall, a strong mechanic.
Mhm.
And Craft, I think there's a lot of room and potential, and I think it's a really cool area that they explored, so I'm glad to see that. Were there any mechanics that you feel like should have been in the set that were not? And that's a tough question because there are an insane amount of mechanics in Magic's history. I'll just go ahead and say that the only one that made sense to me, and not it's not even a good mechanic, but the one that could have returned here is Echo. Wouldn't Echo have been a fun inclusion?
Oh my
in the Lost
God.
Caverns of Ixalan. Of course, nobody wants Echo, but it sure would have fit thematically at
That would
least.
have been that would have been good.
Actually, hold on.
What?
In this set, Echo would have been good because that would trigger Descend.
Oh, wow. Okay. I was just using that as a joke, but yeah, you're right, Sean. How amazing would that have been?
But you're on to something.
Genius. I'm going to take credit. I'm going to re-edit this. I'm going to record my line and say, wouldn't Echo be great? Okay. Yeah, so that actually would have been an interesting way to reuse an old mechanic and have an advantage with that, or at least a gameplay element that could be an interesting choice. All right, that's pretty cool. And then I guess one of the last points of discussion I'll bring up is, are there any favorite cards? What's your favorite card or favorite design from the set? One that you just like the most, the art or the mechanics or anything about it. Colin, is there any one card that you really love in the set?
Well, I brought it up earlier. I like the Sovereign Cat, or Cat Noble. Not just because it's cat. I think I mean mostly because it's a cat, but also because I like the ability of it. Was one of those things. When I first read it, it was a real head scratcher for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had to really, and this is probably saying more about me than anything else, but I really had to noodle over this one for a minute
Sure.
to fully kind of wrap my brain around it. I was like, oh, that's an interesting but very specific thing. And then and this is the one that, when it attacks, for each creature you control with power greater than its base power, put a number of counters on it. And as I was thinking about that, I was like, that's cool, but there's no, I don't think I'll have it much use for it. And then I thought about it, I was like, oh, I have a cat equipment deck that does nothing but change,
Mm-hmm.
power and toughness. So like that's perfect. And I was like, oh, that's like a sneaky. I thought that was like kind of a very sneaky to me.
Right.
And that could just again, that could just be me. But I liked that, and once it kind of clicked for me, I was like pretty excited about that card. And then Sovereign has like a little helper too, Kutzil, who kind of benefits by helping you draw cards too,
Mm-hmm.
if
If they have
in
the
such a
counters on them.
situation. Yeah, so I like the two of them, because I like cat, cards in general. And then when I started thinking about it, I'm like, oh, these are actually some pretty fun, like pretty useful cards. And the way they went about it was sort of like a little bit of a surprise. I had like that light bulb moment, so I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it is an excellent design, and I think it doesn't look as powerful as it actually is. And I think,
Hmm.
right now I would say that's a card that's undervalued as far as its price. And I think if people see it in action more, it doesn't take much to get the ball rolling on that, and then it
Hmm.
just will start growing. Every time you use it, it's actually going to grow more and more, so it'll become more and more powerful. So yeah, I think that is a good
Hmm.
choice. Sean, what about you? What's your favorite card from the set?
Well, this is my favorite, but I will agree with Colin. I'm excited to play with Sovereign Oakeneck
Mm-hmm.
as well. I'm going to put it in my Bright Palms deck,
Oh, that's very good.
and
Ooh.
I'm very excited to see how it works.
I'm not looking forward
But
to
as far sure you are.
that.
Um, as far as like design cards, I really like Preacher of the Schism,
Oh yeah,
the
Mhm.
uh, the
Death
death
Touch
touching
Vampire. Hmm.
vampire,
Right.
right? Where if you attack an opponent who has the most life, you make a 1/1 with lifelink, and then if you attack an opponent and you have the most life, you draw a card. I just like how it's designed, how it makes lifelinker so you can try to gain life back to
Hmm.
then try to draw cards. I just think it's really interesting. It's like a cheap creature with a lot of value stapled to it.
Yeah, that card has a lot going for it. It is a neat design, and I think it's even seen some competitive format play. So yeah, that's a good pick as well. My favorite design from the set is a card that I would argue is now or should be a format staple for any decks that play red, and that is Brass's Tunnel Grinder. I can't get enough of that
Mhm.
card. I got to use it in one of our games, and it was just as good, if not better, than I thought it might be. So I think there's an incredible amount of power in that card, and it's very cheap and easy to play. You can fit into a lot of deck archetypes. And one of the other things that I really love about this card is just the design of it. It actually encompasses 4 different mechanics from the set. So it is one of the cards that descends, where it will gain a counter each turn if you've descended. Once you get enough counters, it will transform, so it uses that mechanic as well. And on the backside, the land, Tekuthlan, will let you discover if you use the mana from the land to cast a permanent spell. And wouldn't you know, the land Tekuthlan is a cave. So there you have 4 different set mechanics combined into one card. This is probably my choice for best design card of the year. I think it's amazing.
Of the year.
Of the year.
Wow.
Of all time.
Very nice.
Mhm.
No, just this
Oh.
year.
I will say that card is pornographic. When
Pornographic.
you played that,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's disgusting.
Yeah.
It's vile. That card does
Yeah.
vile, inhumane things. I can't wait to play with it either. I'm going to put it in all my red decks.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's
It,
it's
it's a great card.
yeah, it's certainly be considered a staple. All right, that is going to end our discussion for the art and mechanics and the themes of the set. So we'll just go ahead and give any closing parting thoughts you might have. I don't know if there's any closing thoughts you have, Colin.
What do we think about Jurassic Park? The Jurassic Park card.
They look like they all look like they're actually like pretty decent cards, but
Mm.
I've gotten to the point with some of these supplemental things where it's like I just don't want to read them anymore. Like I don't want to see something that like, oh, I like that card that looks really good, but it's going to be really expensive, and it's from an IP that I don't really want to include. It's just I'm a little
Yeah.
fatigued with that, so I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on them. But I remember thinking, oh, these cards do look pretty good.
Yeah, the art on them is cool. I think some of them. Yeah, I don't know. I like seeing the shout outs, but I don't think I'll end up. Maybe the land, but they're so
Hmm.
expensive. So I can't imagine that I would put much use of any of them, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot
yeah.
of the dinosaurs are really cool. Some of the spells are
Mhm.
cool. It's the legendary creatures that are like
Yeah.
Jeff
Yeah.
Goldblum or Sam
Right.
Neill. That's where I'm kind of
Yeah.
like, I'm not too
Yeah.
interested in
Same.
that.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
dinosaur I can justify to myself,
Sure.
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. I think Command Tower. There's that Command Tower reskin. I wish it was from the original one though, but I think they pulled the art on that from Jurassic World.
Hmm.
But yeah, yeah, some of that stuff. But yeah, I totally agree, Sean. The legendaries stick the
Yeah.
landing.
Right. Yeah. That's I think really what turned me off. A parting thought that I have, I shared with you. So we're recording this on April 2nd. Yesterday was, of course, April 1st, April Fool's Day. If you haven't seen, I created an April Fool's video. You're welcome to go check that out. But I got a surprisingly large amount of backlash for this video. I was a little surprised. I don't know if you guys are like most people on the internet, apparently, who hate April Fool's Day, but I was a little surprised by the reaction I got from the joke video that I made. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, if you saw.
I mean, I saw the video and some of the comments on the post. I mean, it's Reddit. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'm not surprised a bunch of people got super salty.
Yeah,
Well,
depends on
yeah.
which corner of Reddit. Is either they hate everything or they love everything, and we'll hear no
Yeah.
arguments.
Yeah, I guess there's just a lot of
Counter-
there's a lot of April Fool's etiquette that I wasn't aware of. And so what I've
Yeah.
learned is if you're going to make a joke post on April Fool's, you don't want people to think that it's real. You actually want them. It's better if they know that it's a joke ahead of time. So Reddit, I will tag my future April Fool's jokes with the humor flair. So I won't make that mistake
Is
again.
is that the April Fool's Day Reddit?
As far as I can tell, yes. Um,
That's defeats the whole purpose.
That's
The whole
I thought so as well, and one person did come to my defense and argue as much, and he was downvoted into oblivion. So I apologize to that redditor for all the negative karma points they received in my
Ah,
defense. But
jeez.
Look,
Remind me
I'll,
not to stick up
hopefully,
for you.
yeah,
I think that April Fool stuff on the internet, I think gets kind of a bad rap. I think it's kind of easy to, uh, at this point for people. I think it's easier to hate it than to support it.
hmm
It's kind of the pendulum is swung that way. I was just thinking of this. One of my favorite, and it goes so against that idea of like tagging it and telling people it's not real, but there was I don't know if you guys ever went on JoeBlow.com at all. It's like like a movie news site.
hmm.
I imagine it still exists, but I don't really track it that much anymore. But they used to they did a post one year where they were announcing a sequel to Seven called Eight. And they like presented dead serious, right? Like they were
Yeah,
and it's something with like John Doe was gonna get I forget what happened. Like there's like something that is picking up the thread, and you're like, but wait, like the movie doesn't end with like there's no way like
right,
they should make another one of these like and you get so far down, and then when you realize what it was like, oh okay, you could laugh about it, but
right.
that was also whatever that was like maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah,
All
pretty
becomes
much.
slightly more joyless.
Yeah,
Subsequent 2 decades.
yeah.
But I don't
Just
know.
remember, every day someone reads an Onion article and thinks that it's real. You
True.
know.
Yeah. So that was my exciting
Uh,
news.
I support your putting more humor in. Go for it.
Thanks,
We
guys.
need that.
Thanks. Yours is the only upvotes that matter to me. You guys have any shout outs or any things you want to plug for now?
No, I got nothing to plug.
Nothing? No,
Yeah, I already
working on
plugged
anything? There
JoeBlow.com.
you go, Joe Blow. Go visit Joe Blow if it exists. Critics of the Coast is not sponsored by JoeBlow.com,
Yeah, right.
but we could be.
Yeah,
All
maybe
right.
it could be an affiliate site. You never know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I do have something to plug. You can follow me on X at unsolicitedmtg for more terrible April Fool's jokes and other nonsense and any other updates regarding this YouTube channel. Plus, I'm going to be sending out tweets or zeets. I don't know what they're called anymore, but I'm going to be zeeting out the week before we film our Critics of the Coast episodes. I'm going to ask for topic ideas. If anyone responds to my post and provides a topic that we discuss on the show, we'll go ahead and give you a shout out as well, so you can get your name mentioned to all of the perhaps single or double digits of people that might listen to this. Though my April Fool's video is close to 400 views now, so that's, who knows? Maybe this is the start of something big.
Gonna break the internet.
We're gonna break the internet. I think I've only acquired one new subscriber after all of that, but we'll do what we can.
Every bit counts.
Every bit counts.
Yeah, exactly.
Check back on the channel next week. I'm going to be premiering the first episode of Gabe's Faves, so I'm going to be picking out my favorite cards from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Though, if you've listened to this podcast, you've already heard most of those. But check it out anyways. Go ahead and listen to me talk again. Repeat myself. And then the following week, it's actually going to be the first episode for report cards for the Outlaws of Thunder Junction. So there's a lot going on. The wheels of magic continue to turn. All right.
It's like a train coming down the tracks.
It's like a train. Very good. You've got a knack for this, Sean, I've got to say. That's why you're here. That's why we pay you the big bucks. All right, I do want to thank...
waiting on that check.
Oh, okay. It's in the mail, I'm sure. Anyways, I want to thank Colin and Sean for spending the time joining me here to talk about all this stuff. I really enjoy all the different perspectives you guys have to offer. It's a pleasure chatting with you, so thank you for taking the time to do that with me.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. And on behalf of Colin and Sean and myself, thank you so much for listening. I hope we earned a like and subscribe from you, and let us know what you think of the show. We'd be happy to get that feedback. All that said, I'm Gabe from Unsolicited Designs, and Who Asked Us Anyways?